Cold call for treatment.
Okay. One of the problems that we're experiencing in Laredo is we are a major deportation point in the nation. We have found that there are many deportees who have excellent grounds for political asylum in our country. I have a group of 40 college students who are studying as paralegals at this point, and they're willing to go in and work with these people in terms of social justice, in terms of getting them legal asylum. We've opted to form a nonprofit corporation which will cost us nothing. The Refugee Assistance Council, who will operate this total program for us. May I have your views on it?
Okay, what I'd like to do, not to say anything, I'd like people just from their seats to say what the bishop is thinking. What is he thinking? Just speak from your seat.
Our liability issue.
Right, exactly.
Okay?
One more thing for us to do.
What does this have to do with campus ministry?
Why do I need to get in this? If you've got a non-profit organization and you're doing fine, why do I want to get into it?
How many of these students are Catholic?
How many vocations are there?
Okay, okay. I'm very impressed. Sure, yeah, this is very impressive. Okay, it's possible. Just playing different responses that might have. Good, thank you.
Can I offer you the real response?
Yes.
No.
Okay, reverse roles. If you're going to do the real response,
Okay, the
reverse
real
roles.
response.
Reverse roles. Be the bishop.
Ready? Why would you ever get involved in something like that? Where are the vocations and where are the liturgies?
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
And my response was,
Okay, go back to your seat if you're going to do the response.
the pastoral says we must educate for social justice. What better way of educating for social justice than to put the students smack in the middle of the system?
Okay,
He
good.
said, if it's not going to cost me anything, do it.
Okay, good.
Two-year study by the diocese order.
Let's try somebody else. How would you present to a general? I'd like it'd be very interesting to hear what people do. That was a good one. Anybody else? Okay.
I'll do it like for the old bishop, not the new one. Well, Bishop, we've got this pastor letter. No, not even with the new bishop do we have to worry about that. We got this pastor letter, and Bishop, I'm not going to ask you what you think. I'm just going to tell you what we're doing because I know that if I have to ask you, then you have to give me an answer, and I don't want to put you in that position. Because developing student leaders, we have lay presiders, and our students are lay presiders in liturgy. And we don't do it too often, but we do it once in a while, sometimes on Sunday when I can't get anybody. So I'm not asking your approval for this, but I'm just telling you. You want to know what the bishop said? I trust you.
Wow.
Now we'll do it with the old bishop. Now we got a new bishop now. See, I'm coming in, and it says, Bishop, we got this pastor letter. Oh, okay, pastor letter. How many vocations? Oh, Bishop, we're getting vocations. We're getting, we had 3 go last year, and we had 1 go this year, and he says, well, that's nice. He says, but how many people are going to church? And I said, well, we're getting a lot of them. Well, are they all students? I says, no. Are you taking away from the parishes? And I says, I'm lucky. I work in a city where the other pastors don't care. In fact, we do stuff together. We meet 4 times a year with all our student leadership and the youth ministers and the pastors and the associates, Knights of Columbus, Catholic Daughters, St. Vincent de Paul. We meet 4 times a year to see how we can all work together.
Okay, let's see. What is the bishop thinking? This is just general. This is what would he be thinking at this point? Anybody?
No liberal economy left wing.
No, I think he's thinking institutional advancement, institutional places.
Right. Right. Anything else? What else might be going on in his mind? I didn't want to get in trouble. I don't know. Would that be something? Just whatever you do, don't get me in trouble. Don't embarrass me.
No,
Okay, okay.
his question was, have you talked to the dean about this? And I said, no, we haven't, because this is just our city, it's not the deanery. And he says, well, I think you should talk to the dean. I said, well, Bishop, I says, our dean has made it quite known he wants campus ministry shut down. And he took steps to do that. Oh.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate this little thing here. What I want to do is, I'm going to come, thank you. Let's give him a hand. I think that's a real act hunger there that you had. Whatever. I want to just finish by saying what I learned from this process. The first thing I learned from working through the pastoral letter is the art of maybe. At the time, I was so singly focused that I thought that the only way for life to continue was for this to be done in a certain way. And I've learned that that's not true. It would have been, ultimately, I think it would have been too bad, but I could see that maybe if we hadn't had a pastoral, maybe that would have been okay too. Or maybe if we had had the quest for wisdom, maybe we should have made a stronger statement for that and kind of lived and died on that point. Or maybe, it's I don't cast things in quite as concrete terms as I used to. I think it's just really important in terms of any document or program or whatever, as far as I'm concerned, to look at to be open to the various options and not to get too attached to one way of doing things. Absolutely. Whether it is parish-based ministry, youth and young adult and campus ministry, higher education. I mean, there are important things, but it's important to be able to look at the maybe side of things too. So that's one thing I've learned from this. The second thing is that I really believe that there are no evil empires. There are people I disagree with. There are people I think are wrong and sometimes hurtful. But I think that mostly it's systemic, and I think that it's really important to live and work and feel comfortable working within systems, and not to take things personally when you're dealing with a systemic reality. And so that's the other thing I learned. The thing what I would hope today is in terms of this presentation, I've tried to do is not only to say what I believe or say how this works, but to model this in such a way that might be useful for yourselves. Modeling specifically in terms of a couple of techniques that you may wish to use with students or campus ministers. One is the spectrogram, and which I was going to do one which I didn't do, but it was one was hot and cold, and the pastoral letter on campus ministry. Where would you stand on that spectrogram between hot and cold? That would have been an interesting one to do, but I didn't do that. But something simple and safe, like how long have you been here? Things like that are really a great way of getting people. I really believe, this is part of my own belief system, especially coming from psychodrama, that it's really important to get people on their feet and shake them up a little bit. Because people go into trance and they go, woo! And unless you're able to kind of move them out of that a little bit, you're not going to move them forward. And so getting people on their feet, moving them up, getting them to small groups, or doing however you do that is something I really believe in, and I would promote to you as a method that you can use to use it. The third one was role-playing. And I think the essence of the role-playing is being able to see from the point of view of the person, both people who are playing the role, the campus minister and the supervisor, superior bishop, whoever it may be, to try and look at things through that person's point of view. If you're able to do that, you're able to reverse roles with them. It's a very psychologically healthy thing to do, and it also will help you in terms of understanding where they're coming from and being able to deal with them in a positive and effective kind of a way. So I purposely did that to give you a way of thinking about relating to structures and people within structures that you have to deal with. So with that, I would open it up for a discussion. We have a few minutes. We have maybe 10 minutes just to discuss, and Then I'm going to, is that acceptable? Is that okay? Okay.
Could we use the mic, Joseph?
Sure.
Click it on.
Okay, on. Okay. It's on. Okay.
Joe, with the shift basically in the hierarchy of the country over the past, say, 15 years, we have a number of bishops who were not part of this process. Is there a way to, because I think some of the bishops don't know about the pastoral letter either. I wonder if there is something, or is a mechanism, like the National Advisory Board or Council, whatever that is, if the National Advisory Council took this process up with every pastoral letter that was written, a re-education, a suggestion for a re-education forum for the bishops to make them aware of what they did in the past, because I'm sure it's with the economic pastoral too, and the pastoral on peace and war, or whatever, pastoral on peace. That a lot of the bishops are after that, and even Albert was saying that when they come to Frank G. Lewis, the campus ministers don't know about the pastoral letter because basically they weren't part of the process. And I wonder if there's a re-education component that could be put in for bishops to learn about what they've done in the past.
Right. I really agree with you. I think that it's important to avoid coming to a bishop like with pastoral in hand saying, this is the pastoral, you must believe, you must do, because they become defensive and say, no, I wasn't part of it, don't like it, you can't make me do anything. It becomes a power struggle. And the first thing you want to avoid ever in any situation is a power struggle. People lose power struggles. Power struggles are very poor things to get into, and people get into them very quickly without knowing it. What you have is a language in the pastoral that is beyond a power struggle. You have and instead of getting in a power struggle, start using the language of the 6 elements. The language of every one of those elements is divided into 3 parts. I'm sure that most people are aware of this. The first part is looking at the situation. The second part is a theological reflection on that situation. And the third part is the practical response. That is a process that is beyond getting into a power struggle. That's saying this is a basis of dialogue. So my suggestion is dealing with the pastoral, do not get into power struggles, but start using the language, because it's the only game in town. There's no other definition of pastoral campus ministry in the United States. I mean, you've got it. If you use it without getting into power struggles, you'll be far ahead. That would, I don't know. Any other response to that? Yes.
Well, as you were asking that question, one of the things that I was sitting here thinking was that in the last 10 years there have been bishops appointed who I think are probably even trying explicitly to distance themselves, if not overturn a lot of the work that was done in the 1980s, even with respect to the peace pastoral and the economic pastoral.
Sure.
That they would look at those things and say that was a period of aberration in the National Council.
Right. Has no authority.
And so to go to the bishop and say, look, this is a pastoral letter, they're going to say, not only do I not own that, but I think that's something that should never have been.
Right.
So how do we even use the language of that pastoral among ourselves? If the bishop is going to say, well, where are you getting those 6 ideas about campus ministry from?
Well, that's the point, though. To me, it stands on its own. You don't have to say this is a pastoral letter. You say these are 6 ways of looking at campus ministry, and I'm open to looking at other ones if you'd like to. But this is what my understanding is, and so you use the language without necessarily even saying pastoral. You see what I'm saying? So You use the language, you use the formulas, you use the way of thinking of it, and it will fit into the total situation, but you won't bring up the defensiveness and the power struggle with the bishop. Yes?
I've been thinking about the document Quest for Wisdom.
Yes.
Kind of in the framework of apocryphal wisdom for campus ministry. We've seen a lot of work done in the last so many years in apocryphal literature paralleling Scripture. And just kind of taking a springboard from your last remark, you know, perhaps that's something that we could turn to for feeding our own insights.
Sure. I very much think that would be a good idea to do.
I think we all like to be stroked in different ways, and as I understand it, the bishops are discussing the letter going out to college students as a follow-up, 10-year follow-up to the pastoral. When we get home, perhaps just a note to our ordinary saying, gee, how do things go? And here are some of the ways we're doing that. I don't know how many of you have seen the agenda that those people carry when they go into a meeting, but it's huge. You know, there's big double-sized ring binders, and that presumes that they have time to read it. And depending on what any one of us does for a living and what our personal bent is, we might read some things more thoroughly than others, might not read it at all. But we have been appointed by the bishop as his staff. And if we go back to the bishop and say, gee, I like what you did about this particular part of your entire ministry, and this is how it affects the people whom you told me to minister to, he might listen.
Yeah, that's good psychology, too. You know, just affirming positive things and ignoring negative ones is a way of shaping behavior.
With the phrase too, the phrase that I invoke many times, but I don't like when other people do it to me, is it's easier to get forgiveness than it is to get permission. And I think that I've never believed in the fact that we should, before we do something, go to the bishop and ask him if we can do it. I just figure we just do it, and if he doesn't like it, he'll say something, and if he does like it, he probably won't say anything. So you just keep going until, and then you explain. But you know, I think once you get the wheels going, you know, I would never go to the bishop and say, "Here's the pastoral letter. Now, what do you think we should do with it?" I wouldn't. I'd never ask that question. I'd just say, "Let's do it." Okay. And let's hear feedback about it. And if we don't hear any, then we know we're doing fine. But I don't know if we need. You know, when I was younger, I thought it's nice when the bishop recognizes you and says, "Oh, you did a good job," and stuff like that. I don't need that as I get older, and I'm not expecting it. I just do my job and do the best I can, and you might get a little crust of bread once in a while. That's fine, but I'm not gonna rely on that for doing a good job.
The futurists are talking about whole person love, and going into the future, it's not the cookie idea of love that somehow you compliment me and we make up each other, but we're two whole persons in relationship. And I think that's what I hear you saying, that's a really good model. You know, I am an adult, I'm acting responsibly, and I expect you to be adult and act responsibly, and we can work in relationship in that way. And I think that's a healthy, and it's a futurist kind of approach to relationships. Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful morning. I really appreciate your attention. It's been really fun and very, very challenging for me, and very, very enjoyable. And I would be very happy to discuss with anybody any thoughts that you may have otherwise, and we'll have more time this afternoon to do some more discussion. So thank you.
Morning. Where's Joe? Oh, Joe. Yeah. Thank you. Got a chance to talk at lunch with Joe today. Fascinated by his story and retelling it. I mean, we wouldn't have that document without Joe. I mean, it was his life. He had a vision at the right time in history that it would be good for campus ministry to have this pastoral letter. It'd be good for the bishops to think about it, be good to have all the consultations, be good to have something in writing. And I think in retrospect he was right, and he fought for it like crazy. And I mean, he put his lifeblood into it. The meeting, a lot of the story he didn't tell. The meeting in Orlando, the last one, Joel was, I mean, just about had it. I mean, he was about dead. I mean, he was walking around. You know, I asked him, you know, what really was he sick with? He was sick with the pastoral. I mean, it was his life. He was consumed by it. We had so many problems with it and rejections and last-minute things, and we had to just work like crazy, and Joel just was collapsed. Yet there he was in Orlando for 3 days trying to carry on and run the meetings. We never would have had it without him. Joe once told me when they bury him, he wants to have on top of him in the coffin the pastoral letter. I mean, and he was serious, and it's important to him. And it's important to Joe that it stands up, that they still use it at the Frank J. Lewis School to organize the thinking about campus ministry and so on. You know, history is fascinating. I mean, if I was to tell the story, it'd probably sound a lot different than Joe about the whole pastoral. I mean, I remember personal touches. I remember we were having a meeting in Buffalo, I think it was, or someplace, and we were going by Niagara Falls. It was just a few minutes, and we were going to be late, and Joe said, "You ever see Niagara Falls?" I said, "No," stops, takes me there, and so on. I remember in the early days when the whole thing where Joe was so supportive. I mean, we'd have these meetings, you know, and everybody sit around and have these great ideas and then jump in a plane and go home. I had to go home and write them all down, you know, I mean, and Joe was always supportive and all that. I have a different view of the Quest for Wisdom than Joe does. I don't think it's that good a document, and it's my hand. And the reason is there was a strange series of events when we wrote that. Right while we were writing it, 3 major documents came out from the world of higher education. By the Carnegie Institute, by Bennett, wrote one at that time. What was that called? The Legacy, something about it had legacy in it. 3 major documents came out while we were writing it. And we were sitting there with a finished document that appeared almost at the same time as those documents without any reference to them, without any interaction with those documents. And I think, therefore, there was many ways in which the Quest for Wisdom was a flawed document. But to me, when it came down to the rejection by the bishops at Collegeville, and by my own estimate, less than half of them actually read it. You know, it was a groundswell, as Joe suggested, and it emanated from certain dioceses that to be against it. And most of the guys never read it. I figured that out by informal survey. And then at that point, as Joe knows, I had a great conscience problem, which I voiced publicly in saying that I thought it was a major mistake in the history of the church not to address the concerns of higher education. We had those 500 responses we had came from almost every state, from Harvard, Yale, presidents, Harvard, Yale, small community colleges, and without exception, they said they welcomed a word from the church about the situation of higher education. Without exception, that they wanted a word, expect a word from the church. And my summary statement, when I expressed my own conscience problems, said right when bishops are willing to speak out on peace and war and on the economy, and we got people looking for a word on higher education, the bishops are not ready to issue that. But my own sense is that it goes along with the fact that the document really is not that good. And I think I would still say that. My own reason for carrying on and continuing to write was part of the sense of obligation, as Joe suggested, but also the idea that we could take bits and pieces of the Quest for Wisdom and weave them into the Empowered by the Spirit. And it's sort of been ever since my own life mission to make sure that Empowered by the Spirit is not read as a ghettoized document. In other words, the great danger is always that campus ministry gets pushed to the margins, to the periphery, both in the church and by the university. The story I've been using lately, or the model metaphor, is John Mayer's book, Jesus, the Marginal Jew. Jesus, the Marginal Jew. And I think it often works out, the campus minister, the marginal person. And what Jesus did, especially as we see it in Luke's gospel, was he insisted he go to the center, set his face to Jerusalem. And no matter what, he set his face to Jerusalem and proceeded to the center of power to confront and to bring the message, to spread the kingdom. And it provides at least some sort of analogy for what I always think of campus ministry being, that movement to the center of things, so that we cannot be dismissed as being peripheral. But my reason for continuing to write was that I thought we could salvage some of that essential thrust of the quest for wisdom, ministry to higher education, and bring it into empowered. And I think we did that in some ways. It's hidden, and the bishops who were opposed to it didn't see it, but I think it's in there, and I keep going around trying to emphasize that. Anyway, I just thoroughly enjoyed Joe's presentation, and many themes just resonated with me. The future, great importance of systems. Boy, we just have to see it. How does our system, the university system, work? This university in this place. What are the power structures? Who are the key players? How do they interact? That's one of the great reasons for arguing with our bishops to have campus ministers at longer time at our places. Because you can't get that system just overnight. It takes a long time to figure it out, to work one's way into it, to understand how things are maneuvered through committees, and who makes the final decisions about things. How do you get things done? All of that takes time, but it's important that we're thinking in those terms. And I can tell you, in dealing with a lot of campus ministers, that we have a lot of people who don't think in those terms. Unfortunately. I mean, we have a lot of ghettoized campus ministers. I mean, they're happy to have their retreat over here, and we all pat ourselves on the back and say a prayer together and believe we're saved and close to God and so on. And whatever's going on over there being the university, its structure and all of that, the whole campus life is unconnected. That's very bad, and one of my great reasons for talking to a group like this would be to encourage everyone to summon up the energy and strength to keep marching us to the center, marching us from the margins to the center, as Jesus set his face to Jerusalem. Jesus, the marginal Jew, can become the model for us moving to the center. I have redone my talk since what you're looking at. I wrote it on the plane coming, and that's why Dan Zach will be extremely disappointed, because you always have notes from me. We don't have them today. Those talks are all discarded there about the one facing the future and so on. That's my topic, but I've organized it in a different way. It's not typed out yet. I was up at 3:30 this morning working on it. And redoing it because I wasn't pleased with it. Anyway, those handouts you do have, the topic later on today is on spirituality, and I will allude to some of that then, and other things there that I thought could be of value to you, especially in terms of a comprehensive approach to campus ministry based on the 6 aspects of ministry that we have in the pastoral and have still held. It's a great joy to Joe Kenna that those still structure what we're about. And as I thought he did an excellent job in answering the questions and saying, well, it isn't because it's in a book, it's because what we do. We form community, you know? And somebody walks up to a bishop and says, hey, we said we were going to educate for justice. What better way can you educate for justice than to have these people involved in a justice issue? Oh, so the categories hold. Joe came to Toledo one time. We're walking along the Maumee River, and Joe says, well, we don't need that educating for justice in there. What did I say, Joe? No, it's pretty strong. Don't say it. Don't say it. Yeah.
It's not that I didn't want it. It's just that I thought politically it
might not fly, right. And I said, Joe, I don't care if it flies or not. You have to have it. But anyway, the categories hold because they're real. Because that's what we do. That's what, near as I can figure, we form community. We try to develop the Christian conscience. We're trying to get leaders. We're trying to help people develop. That's what we're about. And it's a way of organizing our thinking. The thing that's on my mind a lot today, and it sees it surfaced here with this, is the word tensions. One of my last books was called Tensions in the Church. The word tension captures a whole lot of what life is about these days. You might even have tensions in this group. Might have tensions between this group and the CCMA. How do I know? No. What do I know? I come in as an outsider. But there's tensions all over the place. And so what I've done is organized my thinking around 9 tensions. Reminds me when Avery Dulles got up at the last CTSA meeting and he's talking about Catholic theology. He got up and he says, well, there's 15 characteristics of Catholic theology. And everyone sort of groaned, oh, no, 15. I told Avery I was giving a talk, I had 10. At least I cut it down a bit. So I got it down to 9 today. I'm not sure I'm going to cover 9, and frankly, I don't care. Because the main problem is, how do I keep people awake? That is the main problem. And frankly, I haven't figured that out yet. How about my last speaking assignment, Dan? That wasn't my last one, but not long ago. I'm sitting in a room, great, much bigger than this. It's 30 degrees outside, and it's about 35 inside. I've got 100 students in front of me. They got hats on, coats, and everything. It's incredible. And there's a fireplace at each end of the room that is doing absolutely no good at all. And these students are sitting on hard benches with no backs. And I got 3 hours with them. Hey, man, anything looks good since then, you know. You know the most remarkable thing about that? After I did a little break after each of them, I had 6 different segments to my talk. And after each one, I gave a discussion first. And they'd have their discussion, they'd run to the fireplaces, you know. So this time, after the third one, I was talking about intellectual growth, right? And I said, well, it'd be interesting exercise to say, how would you tell somebody else what you believe as a Christian? And at first they had to write what they mean for 2 minutes. Then they had to do it. Well, it was unbelievable. I sat back, Dan could tell you this, and after 8 minutes, everybody but 2 people were still sitting there talking. They didn't run to they were freezing that, didn't run to the fireplaces. Very interesting. I couldn't fathom. In fact, I asked a number of the students, you know, what? They said, oh, we were in serious conversation. That's an important issue. How would you tell somebody what you believe as a Christian? Well, this keeping people awake ought to be easy after that. We just turn on the air conditioning or something. I got 9 of these tensions. I'll work my way through them. The first has to do with how we respond to modernity, to the modern world. The modern world is obviously the world we know, created by Gutenberg and Columbus and Luther and Bacon and Locke and Thomas Jefferson, all the shapers of the modern mentality. And the question is, with that modern world, I mean, how do you respond to it? What do you do with it? One great option, and it's a worldwide option, is fundamentalism. Martin Marty got $3 million, to study fundamentalism. They produced 6 volumes. First one is called Fundamentalisms Observed. As soon as we had Martin Marty talk at our place, and as soon as I heard him, the first paragraph out of his mouth, I said, he's right. He was sitting on a plane after he got the $3 million, saying, how do I organize this? And what Martin Marty saw is, we have been too narrow in thinking of fundamentalism. We think of it as an American phenomenon, turn of the century, Princeton University, Scopes trial, all of that, James Barr, fundamentalism, all that. And he said, it's too narrow. What's the fact is that throughout the whole world, we have fundamentalism contending for the human soul. We all know we got Islamic fundamentalism, right? Now we're well aware that we got Jewish fundamentalism with Rabin, right? We got Buddhist fundamentalism. We got communist fundamentalism, Marxist fundamentalism, trying to deal with Yeltsin, Russia. It's all over the place. We had Catholic fundamentalism, not just Protestant fundamentalism. So, and what Martin Marty did was identify the dynamics of fundamentalism. And what it is, it's a reaction to modernity. It's an inability to deal with the modern world. And it says the whole modern project is wrong. That's why in the United States, you notice it's centered on 2 distinctively modern things. Evolution They're still into that, creationism in the school. And it's centered, secondly, on modern biblical criticism. The two touchstones of modernity. They just can't deal with it. And why? It's not just they don't like it intellectually, they see it as an attack on their being. Their very identity's at stake. And what do you do when your identity's at stake? You circle the wagons. You get together with one another. You go back to the fundamental documents and try to find weaponry to fight against this modern evil. So modernity, that's the common thing, and it happens whether you're a Marxist or a Buddhist or a Jew, whatever. You must fight against everything modernity stands for, democracy and human rights and pluralism and tolerance and all of those kind of things. So that's the first contending element in all this, is a fundamental worldwide phenomenon. Nigeria, you see it at work again with the military regime there now. And of course, the other option in dealing with modernity is what we call an uncritical acceptance of it. If science can do it, let's do it. Just expand the military-industrial complex, build more weapons, do whatever, but just go with it, modernity, whether in an uncritical way. And we got a whole lot of that in our culture as well. And we got some of it, I think, coming out of Catholic circles. I mean, you read some of the Catholic things about the capitalistic system and the free market. I mean, I talked to one of those people that, he thinks the free market is divine inspiration. That's Michael Novak. Michael thinks the free market is really divinely inspired. So we get a sort of uncritical acceptance of elements of modernity. And the third option, and of course one that I want to say that we ought to look at and be a part of, would be a dialectical approach to modernity, where we'd be able to say something like, we affirm democracy, the struggle for human rights, and so on. Tolerance, pluralism, and all of that, where we say no to all the other terrible things about modernity, like individualism, rampant individualism, to the hedonism that it produces, to the rationalism. Geez, I was with a graduate student the other day, and I must say, he's given me his whole line. It almost sounds like the Humanist Manifesto regurgitated. And I said to him, I said, you sound, I wasn't very nice in the conversation. I have to go back and apologize, I suppose, and start over. But it's just somehow, I said, you sound like he was a graduate student and older. I said, you sound like an undergraduate who just read Nietzsche, Sartre, and Camus, and you're off on a kick, Like suddenly, religion's wrong. It's Voltaire smashed the infamous thing, Sounds like, I said, it's warmed over 19th century thought. And every discipline I know, every discipline, physics, sociology, psychology, you've got an understanding of the mystery dimension of life. Almost everybody understands that, rationalistic approaches to human problems don't work. Psychology, sociology, political science, I don't care what it is. You got physicists writing some of the best theology today around, out of the awesome character of the universe, out of chaos theory, so on. Well, anyway, the rationalism, we got to say no to that kind of thing. No to the pollution given to us by industrialization. No to still the nuclear problem. We talk about getting rid of nuclear weapons. We still got enough to blow us up, and maybe the threat's worse than before if you factor in the terrorist thing. So I'm saying a dialectical approach to modernity. Well, what does all that mean for us? That's like a macro analysis. Who's fighting for the soul of the human family? That's what's at stake here. Are the Jewish fundamentalists going to run the situation in the Middle East, or is the spirit of Rabin going to do that? Well, I heard some of the talks Rabin, been playing them back on NPR and so on. They're masterful. They're wonderful, amazing. In terms of this man, reaching out, and when he poured out his soul about what it meant to shake hands with Arafat. Some of you heard that? Gee, but Chris, a man, a murderer, a man who was behind terrorism. Am I going to reach out and shake hands? This was not an easy gesture. That represents to me, a response, constructive response to modernity, and not the Jewish fundamentalists who go back to some scriptural basis to say they ought to be killing people. And there were justifications. That's typical of the fundamentalist thing. Go back to the scriptures, the holy documents, the writings of Marx or whatever, and find justification for cutting people's hands off. The Quran or something. Anyway, so what's all that mean for us? Well, it seems to me all of us got our fights on campus with our own little brand of fundamentalism, which is usually a Christian, Protestant, evangelical fundamentalism, but which is also the Catholic fundamentalism. And I think we have to recognize that. There is a Catholic fundamentalism that is not true to our heritage. It wants to be defensive, circle the wagons, take people on, kick people out, and give litmus tests and so on, and we can't abide that, seems to me. Have to fight against that and come up with a more, as I'm saying, dialectical approach. So this is real to us. This isn't just Rabin and Islamic fundamentalism. This is us on our campuses. I think it's important for us to model a dialectical approach in our interactions with people. I go back to the bishop's pastoral letters on the economy and peace as models of this. They're able to say what's good about the economy and what isn't out of Christian principles. Our bishops gave us a marvelous example. We ought to hold them to that. This was so terrible when Newhouse came out with that article in Centesimus Annus came out in the Wall Street Journal. Some of you remember that. And Newhouse says at that time, well, you see what the Pope said now. He has undercut the basis for the bishop's economics pastoral. That's one of us talking. I think that it's important that there's voices that fight for the very process and the general methodology found in those great pastoral letters. It is fundamentally dialectical. It's not a blanket affirmation of the capitalistic system by any means. That's my first one. Let's see if we have any interaction to that tension that we have to deal with. Comments, questions, fill-ins. Let's do one-to-one for a minute. How about finding a partner? Just force yourself to respond. Think about it. What'd you get out of it? Stay awake. You can stand up. Albert, you can stand up during this. Let me see if we have comments or questions anybody wants to make or say, ask, do. Yeah.
I just think this whole narrow-mindedness, the lack of a dialectical approach, but it comes out of so much fear in the modern world, complexity,
right?
And they just rush to it because it's a panacea, it's an easy solution,
right?
And our young people are very prone to that.
Yes, right. It's important to understand it both sociologically, I think, and psychologically. You emphasize the psychological part. I think it's important. I'd suggest if you look at it, you might probably see two kinds of things. One is the fear element. The fear, the modern world is complex, it's confusing. In fact, now we're moving from modernity to post-modernity. It becomes even harder. We can expect it to be more difficult. And the other thing is having one's identity threatened. That's where the passion comes from. That's where the aggressive side comes from. It's not just a fearful thing, okay, let's gather and support one another. A lot of us do that. But that isn't what they do, is it? It becomes much more aggressive. You have to kill Rabin. You have to cut people's hands off. You got to go after people. You got to attack. It's like Jerry Falwell, who once said the most dangerous person in the United States was Billy Graham. That's exactly, you got to understand that mentality. Why did Jerry Falwell say that Billy Graham's the most dangerous person in the United States? Because he's like us, but he can't be trusted because he plays ball with the modern world in certain ways that we don't like. Therefore, he's the most dangerous person. It's the same reason the Wanderer goes after Raymond Brown. The dynamics are the same. Our identity is at stake. There's where the passion and the aggressiveness comes. We must defend ourselves because we will lose. They will come and submerge us. They'll take us over. Well, a lot of this malicious stuff has got the same character. You have to fight back. And we're seeing more aggressive Catholic fundamentalists like that now. You see it in the Wanderer, or people want to attack the Eucharistic prayer you use on campus, or whatever it is. Yeah.
I was just thinking that I think a dialectical approach, which you said we ought to model in campus ministry, is good, but I wonder, modeling the dialectical approach is different when you place the poles at different places.
Sure it is, yeah.
For example, you were mentioning Richard John Newhouse in his response to
Centesimus Annus.
Right, the encyclical. But I wonder, quickly, one of the things that popped in my mind was, I'm not sure that Newhouse would say that he wasn't being dialectical.
Sure.
That he would put the poles at different places than they made the right.
Exactly right.
And that, to me, that's a problem with the dialectical.
Well, I don't know if it's a problem with the dialectical approach. What it calls for is a more nuanced analysis. It's one of the other tensions I want to take up. If you'd let me take it up in sequence and respond to you in sequence. But it is, you're absolutely right. And it's why it's important to get correct what the fights are, what the tensions are. And a lot of times it depends on the issue, doesn't it? It depends on what question we are examining. Here I'm trying to look at sort of a global sense of things. What's the global fight that's going on? There's other fights with the U.S. culture that's going on. There are other fights going on within the church. So each of the fights, in a sense, has different poles and has different players, different options. And as I put in my book, Tensions in the Church, the important thing today to live effectively and without getting drained and pulled down and despondent is to make the tensions intelligible as a first step to making them fruitful. They got to be intelligible. We got to get it right. We got to use our heads. Jacques Maritain says, not enough to have a tender heart. You got to have a tough mind. That's why a lot of us are gathered back there under that sign, religious literacy. You have to. There is a tough-mindedness that's needed to work our way through this world. So, you got to get it right. And I'm not saying I got it right, but I will bring it up in another context. We'll see if it rings true or not. Let me take up my second tension here. And as you can see, I'm starting at the largest levels and going to work our way down to the last tension of males and females interacting here and now. But starting at a global level and working my way down. So the next tension is what I'm calling globalism versus the new tribalism. People recognize the new tribalism word from Václav Havel. So let me play this out. What's going on in our world, in other words, at a big level, is that we got a global vision like we never had before. Billions of people watch the Olympic Games at one time. Simultaneously around the world we find out about Rabin's assassination and have to deal with it. We have this we have the internet. We're connected in all over the world. We'll do research. Joe Kennick can do research at his home and get material from down in Cincinnati, Ohio without ever going to Cincinnati. So we're going to access libraries all over the world. So it's an unheard of globalism. It's like Marshall McLuhan was a piker compared to what really is happening. We got a global village that's connected, interconnected. So it's incredible. We haven't probably assimilated that yet. But, and this is the fascinating thing, right as the vision expands what's happening, we have this new tribalism. See it all over. Canada, Quebec, separatism. Czechoslovakia. You're thinking there's a nice little country, very tiny country. But the Slovaks want to break off. They got their own country now. Just look at Bosnia. All over the world you get new tribalisms, new interest in ethnicity. Take our own culture. What do we end up? We don't have this, melting pot. Melting pot idea is passé. What we got is all these little interest groups. We can't get legislation passed because the insurance companies are against the medical thing they want to change. There's always some group that doesn't like something. And all these groups function, and it seems like their whole reason for being, the whole thrust and motivation, dynamism is preserve our group. Keep our group identity. And it comes down even to at a smaller level here, because it's now the divorced people want to be with other divorced people. And all the alcoholics are together, that's where they find their inspiration. No? People are involved in Overeaters Anonymous, they're over here. Nobody else understands the eating problem like the